Good afternoon, Ireland. So I'm back in Dalton. It is July 24th. Got this down pack back on. Had a great time in Toronto. Like my new shirt, new trekking shirt. It's the new me for the last quarter. New haircut, all clipped and clean. Feeling good. We'll see how the body is after 9 days of rest. Just immediately bumped into 3 people I knew, 3 hikers back at a cafe there, which was great because I thought I was going to lose touch with everyone I knew. So Taps, Turnip, and a guy, actually I can't remember his name, he wears like stars and stripes shorts and bandana hat and stars and stripes glasses, and he's proud American. So yeah, kind of happy but kind of weird to be back on the trail. 621 miles to go. Hopefully I didn't lose too much fitness over the last 9 days. Toronto was great, a bit difficult again saying goodbye to Emily and the girls this morning, but nearly there. I think I have 6 weeks of trail life and then another week to get home. So here's a couple of those clips I was telling you about from last year. Okay, hopefully they don't bore you to death too much. Ciao. So let's call this Jimbo's Random Rant number 1. So why am I walking the AT? I don't really know. The idea obviously came about from the book, A Walk in the Woods by Bryson. The film version is terrible, by the way. Robert Redford's version is shocking. Bryson, like all of his books, that book is superb. I've read it 3 times and probably itch to get out hiking while I'm reading it and after I've read it. It's very funny, it's very interesting. Unfortunately he didn't complete the AT. He started it and then he gave up when he realized how little in proportion to the height of a map of the AT he saw that himself and his friend were only a tiny amount up a huge big map, and they realized they were never going to complete it, so they chose to go off the trail, and then he himself was visiting key parts of it over the following few months. That's not my plan. My plan is to do the whole thing in one go. I am going to give myself the flexibility that if I'm really not enjoying it and I'm really missing home, the thought pattern is I'm going to leave all my kit somewhere in America, somewhere safe, go home, and hopefully I'll only need a few days and I'll sort of have to go back to get my kit. I'd just be afraid that if I go home I won't go back. So at this stage I'm giving myself that option, that I can pop home for a while. So outside of the book, I've always loved hiking. I've never done anything near, I think the longest I've ever walked and trekked was probably Kilimanjaro in terms of the amount of time. But I think we were in the tent for 6 nights, if I remember rightly. It was a Sunday to a Friday. So in terms of consecutive nights in a tent, that's it. When I used to do a lot of hiking around Wicklow, but that would really only be, I don't think I ever did more than 2 nights. Used to do quite a lot of it, but it'd be 1 night or 2 nights. So this would be very, very different. My plan is to build into that idea. So as we go through this summer and autumn and into the winter, that I just reach further and further into the hills. Or in fact, I don't have to go too deep into the hills. The important thing is that I spend days in the hills and just get used to the whole idea of bad weather, and then having to pitch a tent and cook, and then the next morning having to put wet clothes back on, break down the camp and then get going again, and then do it again that night. It's not like you're packing up and you'll be home later. It won't be. I've got to get used to that whole idea. For me, that will be the difficult thing. The discipline of keeping the kit in order and keeping myself dry and warm. So we'll add to this idea shortly. So I suppose reason number 3 would be I need a target. I think I always need to be aiming at something. For those of you who know me well, I semi-retired February last year. The business that I part-owned was sold, and it put me in a position where I could choose not to work for a while, which is another reason why I can take on the AT. After the AT, I'll make a decision on that stuff. Sorry, that's a sidetrack. So I find it would have been very easy to just slip into a humdrum lifestyle of not keeping healthy, not keeping fit, basically just living alongside my wife. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but just joining that day-to-day routine, which it's not me. So I've chosen the AT as that target. So even if I don't do it, even if I don't get to start it, it's motivating me to try to sort my body out a bit, just to get fitter, shed a few pounds, and just do those things that I've one day I will do X, Y, Z. Well, here I am. I have no excuse. I don't need to work for a while. My family is grown sufficiently. They don't need me around them all the time. And next year was glaring as the best year to do this because, as I say, the kids are at a stage where, next year in particular, where they, from a practical point of view, they don't need me around. Rachel is in transition year and she's doing a student exchange, so she'll be away in Spain for a wee while. The house is pretty settled, well, it will be, after the current wave of builders have gone. Rebecca's in second year in college, which is not one of the critical years, so she's quite independent anyway. So 2019 was sort of jumping out at me as, there's your opportunity. Otherwise I'd be waiting. I'd probably have to wait for about 3 years, and I didn't want to do that. I think in 3 years I could really go to shit. I think if I was to choose that 3-year option, I'd have to immediately probably go back to work or join a gym. Join in with a group of people, go back to golf, go back to as many activities as I could. And maybe that's not a bad thing, but right now I don't want to do it. And I don't want to explain myself. So I've chosen 2019 and I've got a nice, basically I gave myself a year to prepare. And I've, from now, 9.5 months to do that. So reason number 4, I suppose, sorry, just take a sip out of my super lightweight titanium cup. Reason number 4, I've done a few cool things. I've done, a version of the 3 peaks in the UK. I've done Kilimanjaro, and odds and ends. But I've never done something on my own. It's always been motivated by the fact that I'm with other people. And I don't want to let them down, and I want to keep up with them, and, etc., etc. This time it's just me. And I want to keep it that way for that reason. I just want to prove to myself that I can take on something very significant like the AT and prepare properly for it, plan it, get my body in order, get my head in order, and enjoy it and complete it. And I've just got that. I'm very lucky that I've got that opportunity at this stage in my life. I can do it. So that's reason number 4. Is there a 5th reason? Not really. If I think of one, I'll tell you. Good morning, Ireland. It is July 25th. That makes this day 124. Hopefully that wasn't too tedious. Hopefully one or two of you found 1 or 2 bits interesting. It was kind of nice to look back on that myself. And I don't really disagree with any of it. It's all still kind of current. It's still sort of how I feel about everything. So there you go. I'm going to just flip the camera around because I need to look at what I'm stepping on here. Okay. So yes, so last night I just hiked up out of Dalton to a campsite called Crystal Mountain Campsite. It was only like a 5-mile hike. I did manage to take the wrong turn out of town, walked 300 or 400 yards before I realised what I'd done, so I had to walk back though. But yeah, that was the plan, just to drive back from Toronto. I had left Toronto at 6:30 yesterday morning. It was about an 8-hour drive with a couple of pee breaks and refueling breaks. Get the car back to Pittsfield, which is about 3 miles from Dalton. The guy there was very nice and gave me a lift up to a cafe up by the trailhead. Had a lunch and then walked out of town at, I think it was about 3:30, and you know, the plan was just to get a few miles done to get to a campsite and just sort of remind my body of what's expected of it. So off we go again. So I'm about an hour or so out of camp this morning. Quite a pleasant night. Let me just concentrate on what I'm stepping on here. Yep, and yeah, I slept quite well. So today the plan is to get to a shelter at the 16-mile point, and then I have an option to go another 4.7 to a campsite at the 20.7 mile point. I'm under no pressure, but we'll see how I feel at the shelter. So I have 3 questions to answer. The first one from Mark. Okay, what your exact question was, what town does the trail finish in? Okay, the trail doesn't finish in a town. The Appalachian Trail goes from the top of Springer Mountain in Georgia to the top of Katahdin Mountain in Maine. So, slightly controversial issue in my view in terms of working out the distance when you've got to walk up to the mountain at the start and back from the mountain at the end, and yet those miles aren't included in the official distance of the Appalachian Trail. So at the end, Mount Katahdin is I don't know, 5,200 and something feet, and it's in a place called Baxter State Park in Maine, fairly north in Maine. So you get to the very top, and that's the AT done. You have a couple of options for how you come down, and depending on the weather forecast will that'll determine which route I take. There are a couple of exciting routes. There's a knife edge ridge route, and I'll only do that if the weather is perfect. So from there you come back to there's an official campground there where you sort of deregister, if you like. So you report when you get there, and they will they sort of track it, give you a new number for finishing. And that'll be interesting to see what my number moves to. So you remember it went from 14:10 at the start to 6:29 at the spiritual halfway point, and we'll see what it ends up at the end. Hopefully it's still kind of high. I'm kind of hoping that a lot of the people I met are successful, and that would kind of suggest that the success rate would be pretty good. The success rate to Harper's Ferry wasn't great. I was a little bit disappointed and puzzled, but everyone has to hike their own hike, so so the trail finishes at Mount Katahdin, and I expect to be there. I think that was part of your question as well, when I expect to be there. I think the earliest that I'm going to be there will be about the 4th of September. That's getting through the White Mountains pretty well. The White Mountains is probably the most difficult section on the entire AT. You have a lot of very high, very exposed mountains up above the tree line, very rocky, technical area to pass through. So the daily average will drop quite a bit. So if that all goes well, and I don't have any energy crashes, etc., I'll, I'm thinking in terms of the 4th or 5th of September. What I would consider reasonable, and I'd still be I'd be very, very happy just to finish on any date, but will be something like the 7th or 8th. And then my original plan was to finish on the 10th. So that gives me then 4 days to get down to, what's the name of the town? Portland, Maine. Portland, Maine is where I fly out from. I fly to Newark Airport early on the 14th, and then home to Dublin from Newark. I'll be arriving in Dublin on the morning of the 15th. My visa expires on the 21st, so I don't have a lot of flexibility there, and my ticket is not flexible either. So yeah, everything going really great. 4th of September. Everything's starting to be slightly worrying. It would be like the 11th-ish, God, 12th-ish. If it's 12th-ish, I really have to hightail it back to Portland, because I really need to get to Portland on the evening of the 13th. So that would be a bit dodgy. So, you know, finishing on the 11th, I guess, is comfortable. 10th is easy. Better than the 10th is a great result. So there you go. The other questions were, yes, a very interesting question. What is the most demoralizing part of the AT? Start, middle, or end, or is it hot, wet, cold, etc.? So this is a difficult question, almost impossible to answer, because I think it's very personal for hikers. So first of all, I'll tell you that the most demoralizing moment for me was definitely when I was in the vicinity of that Lake Canopus area. It's where I hurt my feet. My feet were in a bad way that morning. I really thought I could potentially be finished on the AT, which would have been just tragic. But the build up to that was the whole July the 4th nonsense, where I ended up sleeping in a bloody, a kid's playground. I mean, that was just, that really wasn't the plan. Completely weird, strange thing to be doing. And I just got the feeling in New York State that they just, I'm tempted to say that they didn't want us there, in the sense that the AT facilities through New York were just a pain in the ass. The trail itself isn't great. It's still a bit, rocky and painful on the feet, like Pennsylvania. There are very few water options, very few hostels, very few shelters and campsites. It was just a bit of a, I just felt like we were a bit of an inconvenience to the state, and we were sort of pushed off to one side. To have that bare mountain area on the trail and have basically no facilities for hikers there should be a campground or a basic hostel or a shelter or some sort in the bare mountain area. There's no reason not to have. It's a huge area, and it's a very simple thing to do. And the lodge is there if you can afford it, if there's room there, etc. But there should be a lot more. So I was just a bit peed off, and that made me think, they don't want me here, and I don't want to be here. So I found that those couple of days, probably from when I arrived at the top of Bear Mountain until I got out properly away from Lake Canopus, I was probably quite demoralized then for quite a few reasons. So that was that. In terms of the start, middle, or end, here I am kind of trying to generalize for other hikers now. I would imagine, I wouldn't say the end. You'd think if they've gotten through the start and the middle, they should be pretty immune to being demoralized. But certainly at the start, I think where people are very disillusioned and they haven't researched correctly, they haven't, watched the thousands of YouTube videos that are available to them, and they just step onto the AT with just the wrong picture in their mind completely about what the trail is like and what trail life is like. I'd imagine that's quite demoralizing, especially if it drops onto the negative side of what they're thinking. Maybe it's different, but in a good way. Middle, I'd say the middle is okay. I think it would all be in the first third or so if you're going to be demoralized. So in terms of the weather, yeah, I think we all even possibly enjoy, storms and, rain bursts. What demoralizes people is when you get, a week of it, where everything is sudden. you're not getting an opportunity to dry things out. You're pitching a wet tent, you're packing up a wet tent. Eventually the water permeates into sort of everything in your pack. I'd imagine I didn't experience that because I'd like to say it's because I'm very, very careful with my stuff. And from Ireland, we get plenty of experience of hiking in the rain. But I would imagine that's a bit of a killer for a lot of hikers. Maybe killer is the wrong word. So there you go, actually using that word, tragic use of that word. Obviously, I'd say a big demoralizing point on the trail was around that murder. There were a lot of people with their heads down, and it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of people got off the trail and gave up as a result of that, which is a pity, but it's also understandable. So that was obviously that was terrible, and hopefully it's many years, hopefully it never happens again. But the stats are actually very good on that. Murders are very, very rare. So there you go. So the third question, which was a fun question, what would the ultimate trail magic be? And that was from Helen. And Helen suggested a couple of answers. Is it like that there'd be a massage there? Would it be, just what would it be? So again, I suppose this varies slightly hiker to hiker, but for me, the ultimate trail magic, let me think. When I see a trail magic, if I've been in the hills for a few days and I haven't really drank anything except sort of water and maybe black coffee or tea, I guess some flavorful drink, some fruity drink is just lovely to get something like that. I don't necessarily want it fizzy, but like a Gatorade or something like that is really nice if it's properly cold. Then I suppose if there's a barbecue going, great. Very great. Oh, I didn't know where to go here. Hang on, let me just check. No, straight ahead. Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, one thing I've sort of touched on before that's really nice, and I kind of struggle with a bit, but getting a chair that has a proper back in it, that you can just sit back and relax. That's surprisingly brilliant. I mean, it might sound like such a trivial thing, but when you've been carrying your pack, well, certainly this happens with me, at the end of the day, right in the middle of my back, I get a bit achy. And when you're in the shelter areas and the campsites, you don't have seats. I mean, you have the picnic benches, but you can't sort of sit back and relax and just rest your back. If you try to find a rock or something, chances are you're going to be covered in insects or God knows what else, anywhere else that you try to sit down. So trail magic with chairs, yes, brilliant. I've heard of some trail magics where they've even got like little shower things set up so you can actually have a shower. I mean, wow. But yeah, the best trail magic was probably the one, oh blimey, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, where they had a barbecue going. They had dry shirts for everybody to put on. They had a washing line set up so you could sort of partially dry out your sweaty shirt. They had a recharging point for your electronics. They had cakes and snacks. They had a water, a insulated water container for you to top up your water. And they had proper chairs. Great conversation as well. They were previous through hikers. So that was superb. And next year, I mean, you're listening to them, that was their 3rd year, so they're really getting into this, and they're sitting there chatting about how they can make it even better for next year. So, I mean, that's brilliant to see these guys just giving back to the trail. And believe me, we take it. They give, we take. So, yeah, that's, for me, that kind of trail magic. I suppose a massage would be nice, but we're all stinking and sweaty. It's not very nice for the masseur. But yeah, there you go. I think what would be a great thing at a trail magic would be if there was like someone medically trained that would do a tick check around your body. And just do a proper, thorough tick check. That would be good. It's something that kind of worries me sometimes, that you can't really see even though I carry a little mirror, you still don't get to see, you know, up your back and, you know, places like that, and in your hair and whatever. So that would be good. So there you go. All right, I'm going to push on. I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.
Open daily 9:30 to 8. Please be respectful.
This is inside the memorial of the rail, so I'm going to go to the top. This is what I need. More climbing. More steps. Et voila. Looking west, Hudson River Valley, Taconic Range, Albany, New York, Berlin Mountain. Looking north, the Adirondacks of New York, Williamstown, the Green Mountains of Vermont, North Adams. Actually, that's where we're going. Nice. Looking east, Mount Monadnock, Mount Wachusett, Adams, and the Hoosick River Valley. Looking south, Cheshire, the Berkshires, Sonata Lake, Pittsfield, the Catskill Mountains of New York, and Whitey's long-handled spoon that he lost somewhere back there. No, can't see it.